Hello and welcome to Agents of Nonprofit. My name is Alexander Lapa, and I'm here to talk to everyday superheroes helping nonprofits using technology. Today I'm joined by guest Dan Hanley to talk about fundraising principles and building relationship with donors. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Alex. Lovely to be here.
So for the listeners that have heard you for the first time, or hearing you for the first time, I should say, can you explain a bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. So my name is Dan Hanley. I live in Southern California in the Los Angeles suburb of Monrovia. And I have a consultancy called Altrui Consulting. And we work with mostly small nonprofits and helping them with building relationships with donors, building their fundraising teams, and doing both of those whose end game will become more fundraising opportunities for the organization. And we're just about to celebrate our 3-year anniversary.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. I'm very stoked.
They say that most businesses, if they're successful past 2 or 3 years, then chances are they've made it past that initial hump and they're on their way up. So that's great. That's great. What made you dive into the nonprofit industry in general? What was the motivation for starting this consulting company, Altrui, right? Alturi.
Exactly. Altrui Consulting. Altrui is based on the word altruism.
Mm-hmm.
And I have been in the nonprofit world of fundraising, leading fundraising teams as a director of development, chief development officer for many years. And we moved to California 7 years ago, and I took on another chief development position. And then while I was doing that, and even before, I've wanted to be able to do that same work only with more nonprofits. I've always worked for nonprofits that I had a huge passion with purpose for. And I wanted to do more of that to engage with fundraising, to support them with fundraising, but not just at one agency. So as my time came to an end with what was my current job, I started playing around in my head on what Altrui would look like. And I started working with a web designer and creating who my donors may look like and building up my social media. And about a week after I finished my last full-time position in the nonprofit world, I introduced the world to Altrui.
Awesome. So what kind of services do you offer as part of this consulting company?
Sure. First and foremost, we work with nonprofits to help them build relationships with their donors. And what that looks like is really just paying attention to donors, acknowledging donors, showing impact to donors, creating a nice network of storytelling, not really looking at donors as the saviors of the organization, but really as just building relationships with people who see the world as my clients see them and want to do better in the world and want to be of service. And so we really focus on creating things as simple as a fundraising development plan, recurring donor campaigns, direct mail appeals, e-appeals. We do a lot of impact work in making sure that development teams build relationships with program teams. You know, a lot of times I've seen where the development team was like in an ivory tower, far away from program people, and they just did their own thing with little interaction with the people actually in the arena serving whatever the mission of the nonprofit is. And so we really try to work with nonprofits to bridge that gap and to build relationships from the fundraising team to the program team. And recently we've been doing a little more recruiting for our current clients, because I realize that we can go through all of these processes with nonprofits, but they have to have a good, solid fundraising team. And so we've been doing a little bit of recruiting to help them strengthen their fundraising teams.
So you really get your hands dirty, so to speak. You're getting in there, making sure that the teams internal to the NPOs are talking to each other. I guess you're doing more coaching, guiding, mentoring type of situation, or is it even more than that? Or is it a one-on-one type thing, or group coaching, or virtual? I imagine most of it is virtual. Yeah, talk about how the actual process works.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. It's different for every client. I have clients throughout the U.S. and Mexico. And a lot of my clients are involved in border work in Tijuana. All of my clients are involved in some type of human rights, social justice, or animal rights type of work. And what we do is we initiate the work by just talking about with either with whoever I consider my client and whoever they want to be on the original Zoom call. It's always on Zoom. I never set the expectation that we'll actually meet, although I have met clients and I do work in Tijuana once a month, so I get to see my clients down there. But that's more of working for Altrui, but also doing volunteer immigration asylum work. But we start the process with the goal has already been created when we go to contract. So for example, strengthen relationships with donors, include a fundraising plan. And fundraising plans can be written out in 5 minutes. Most organizations have done one, very few follow through. So we will not only create it, but we also offer services to engage with and implement any programs, any appeals, any of the work that we do. We can once we're finished with the work, we make sure the client knows that if they don't have the capacity to take what we've done and move forward with it, then we can definitely do that as well. And I find in the nonprofit world, Alex, that there are many instances where a product is sold to a nonprofit with little concern on whether the nonprofit actually has capacity to work within that product. And so we make sure that there is capacity, whether it's on their side or on ours.
Yeah, I've seen it many times when the salespeople of certain products say this is the most amazing product ever, and they're so keen on selling it that they're not ready, or they don't take the time, I should say, to make sure the nonprofit is ready for it. They're actually able to absorb the product and use it and then take full advantage of it.
Exactly. Exactly.
And these kind of engagements, so it seems to be like a two-parter. It seems to be like a design or discovery phase, and then either a support or implementation phase. How long does each one typically last for? Like you said, I mentioned a plan could take only a few minutes, but then actually executing the plan, I imagine, could take weeks, months, years.
Yeah, definitely. We have so our third anniversary is coming up at the end of this month, and we have a couple clients that we've been working with for 2.5 years, where it's a small amount of time every month. So we're kind of like on call. We read anything that's going out that they're sending out. We help train or onboard new staff members, and that can just completely be ongoing. Or, for example, we have 2 recurring donor campaigns going on right now as well, where we provide everything, the entire checkoff list, support, everything an organization needs to create, quite frankly, a super impactful recurring donor campaign. And then we typically will check in and they'll check in with us. But from everything that we've done, they can just move forward with that on their own. And then if there's more work to be done, another type of campaign, on anything else that they want to work with us on, then we're happy to do that. But we'll finish that project and move on to the next.
And you mentioned about recruiting as well. So you actually help the nonprofit recruit the various people for the dev team or the program team. How does that work?
Yeah, that's been a blast, Alex, because you get to meet nonprofit fundraising professionals from all over and have really engaging conversations with them. And so we do that not on the level of like your typical recruiter where they would handle everything and that's what they do and that's all they do. We're really looking at the perspective of how can we support our client in creating a team that is going to rock and roll with all of the work that we've created and everything that we've put in place so far. And so by the time we speak to a potential candidate, we know the organization very well. We have a huge passion for the work that they do, and we know the expectations of what this person should bring to the table. So we start off with yesterday, I had a 20-minute phone call with a potential candidate for a chief development officer position. And then we will do all of the screening up until that point. And then from that call, we send all the packets for the candidates to either the CEO, the current chief development officer, or the COO, or a member of a board, and then suggest who we want to move forward from that process. And then they'll set up a Zoom call from there, and other meetings and calls from that point on. And then we kind of let go after that point. We also excel, and I have a blast writing new job descriptions, because most organizations have a job. This makes me laugh. I apologize. They have a job description that might be 10 or 15 years old. And certainly not in today's world, where the work world really has changed. And in many cases, parts of the mission might be different than they were when the old job description was written. So we get an opportunity to bring them into the 21st century. And in many cases, take something from 4 pages to 2 pages, and something that, at least on reading, feels more inviting for the potential candidate.
So who would be, because all these kinds of services you said are meant, I think, more for smaller nonprofits. Would you say that's true? Like, who would be your ideal client? Is it more on the smaller side, or can you scale up to the larger ones?
We can scale up to the larger ones. They tend to be smaller. And I'll define that as an organization of maybe 50 to 60 employees with a budget of $4 to $6 million. And we also, when we do have a client at $1.5 million with 15 employees. And particularly for Altrui, working in the fields of refugees, immigrants, domestic violence, homelessness, animal rights, and human rights. Those are pretty much our fields.
Yeah, there must have been a lot of changes in the last 15 years. Just to go back to the previous one, as I'm thinking about the previous comment you made, there must have been a lot of changes in just how nonprofits are perceived over the last 15 years. So that old job description, I mean, I can't imagine there's much, or maybe you could tell me how much of that initial job description applies to today. Like, there's a lot more awareness in terms of inclusion and diversity and so forth. So I imagine that there's, and technology as well, and how much things have progressed in terms of how we connect. What have you noticed in terms of the larger trends, let's say, between all those years ago and today? And what do you find yourself having to remove or add to that kind of job description?
I try to pretty much, what we'll do is we'll have a meeting, Alex, with the team, and then we will submit a new job description that basically says, this is what we want you to bring as far as your experience. And actually, that's the second part. The first part is, this is what we want you to do here. This is what the accountabilities are for this position. But instead of saying we want you to bring in $1.1 million with an e-appeal campaign at the end of the year, we'll say we want you to be kind. You have to love or embrace human rights. It has to be a passion of yours. If it's a human rights, if it's refugees, then you really have to have a passion for this type of work. And then I have a whole long sentence of just attributes that we are really looking for, like positivity and compassion and ethical or ethics. And then maybe 3 or 4 of leading the development team, and then some of those specific duties that you may find in older job descriptions. But really, just what type of person are you, and the type of person that we want to lead our development team. And it works really well. It works really well. We've done this. Well, we're doing 2 right now. We've done 2 prior to that. We're still rather new to this recruiting thing, but I'm having the time of my life with it. And I feel like each job description that we do is different and super strong towards the mission and impact of the organization that we're working with.
So it sounds like a real shift from, finance points to more, like you said, attributes and especially qualities, positive qualities. What about any kind of tech skills or any kind of skill set that they would need to be able to complete their job?
Yeah, so I have seen a couple where we work with organizations that have a very strong presence on social media, especially border groups that are doing refugee work. They're giving daily or sometimes two or three reports a day on what's happening at the border, or with asylum cases, or with refugee camps. And so social media has to be strong in many cases. And even though social media may not be an exact fit for technology, I'd say that we also do look at, when I'm looking at candidates, I want to say I of course do this, but maybe not everybody works like this. I do go to their LinkedIn page and see what they look like on LinkedIn, how they're presenting themselves to the professional world.
That's a great window. I find LinkedIn is a great place to get a professional perspective on people. But that's a whole different topic. I was thinking about where we can go with LinkedIn, but that's a different different podcast, perhaps.
It is. It is. I'd be happy to be a part of that.
There's a lot of comments these days about this great resignation or quiet quitting. Do you find that this is the case, or there's an impact to NPOs? Is there concern that nonprofits should have for these two social factors that are happening in the world today?
Well, so I've thought about this quite a bit. And I'll just share based on my experience. And based on my experiences, the positions that we're trying to fill are either new positions or positions of somebody who had been in that position for 3 or 4 or 7 years. So I'm not sure if any of those two are part of that. I will say, though, that when talking to new candidates and looking at current development teams, I think it's absolutely important to say, okay, does she have to be in the office 5 days a week? Does she have to make that drive, especially in Los Angeles? It's like, do the employees every day have to be there? Now, if you're serving food to youth experiencing homelessness every day, well, then that person does have to be there. If you're running an animal shelter, certain staff have to be there all the time to care for the animals. But there are many, many opportunities for nonprofits to look at their team and say, do you want to be here 5 days a week? Or would you like to work from home or elsewhere a couple days a week just to make life easier? And for me, that just makes common sense. I will say that I work from a home office. I thrive from a home office. Not everybody does, but I think when we have to really think about what the life looks like of our employees, and that also includes vacation time. And I don't mean sick time or holidays. I know some nonprofits, they bunch all those up so it looks like you have this big number of time off. What I mean is that I believe nonprofit employees bring it every day. They're in the arena of changing the world and making the world a better place. It's exhausting work and in many cases heartbreaking work, but they show up every day and they bring it. What's wrong with them having 3 or 4 weeks of vacation a year? What's wrong with that? I started working with one client that was giving 1 week of paid vacation after 1 year of work. And boy, we had a lot of honest, transparent conversations, and now they offer 3 weeks. And so there are those types of changes that we just, what do we need to keep our teams? And we need impeccable ethical leadership, which is not always easy to find. We need people who are committed to the cause and the impact of the cause. And we need people who can look in the mirror and say, I really want to be here and I really want to be successful for this nonprofit. And I could go on, but I'll stop there in regards to that and to what possible changes could be made or looked at.
I don't have any actual numbers, but I have a sense that there are quite a few people out there, especially over the last few years with the pandemic, that they just got tired of working for a corporation and said, I want to change in my life. I want to provide some kind of service or be better or provide a better good, and then want to join a nonprofit. In terms of the Great Resignation, as I mentioned, would you or have you seen in your experience people moving from that corporate environment, that stiff corporate environment, to a nonprofit because of the fact that they want to contribute back to the world?
Yeah, so I think if I wasn't in specifically looking at nonprofit fundraising, my answer may be different, Alex. But I would say I don't see a whole lot of that because the positions that I'm looking for are typically the head of fundraising and the head of major gifts or larger gifts or bigger donor relationships. And typically for those, I want some type of experience. And I'm very clear with that in the job description. I want somebody who has done this, who has the experience of being in the nonprofit world. I came from the world of hotel sales and catering. I did special events for a living through Hyatt hotels. And so that really helped me when I came into the nonprofits. But when you're looking at leading a team, most of the people I interview for those first phone calls are people who are currently in the nonprofit world.
No, that makes sense. Let's shift then a little bit to donors. What would you see, or what do you see in terms of common symptoms that an NPO has when they're struggling with their donors? I mean, is it just a matter of donations are down, or is it a type of engagement, or are there other factors that a nonprofit can look at and keep an eye on to make sure that their donors are happy and engaged?
Yeah, so I have a lot to say about that. So give me an hour or so, Alex.
Let's take it. We can take it. Maybe a couple points at a time, and I can ask some. We can go
Of course.
deeper into certain topics. But let's say major top 3 symptoms of we have a problem. We need to donor problem. We need to start deciding what to do next.
Yeah, the first thing that I would say is that people are giving in droves. They are giving. And if my nonprofit is not seeing that, I really want to look internally. I don't want to look externally. And my point there, Alex, is that I don't want to point my finger and say, oh, the economy's bad, or people are losing their jobs, or there's COVID, or there's the war in Ukraine, or whatever reason, because a lot of nonprofits are doing well. And they're doing well because they're engaged with their donors. Again, it's super important for me to make clear that we're not putting our donors up on some type of pedestal. We're just simply creating processes that show gratitude and that show appreciation and acknowledge that you as a donor see the world as we see the world when it comes to refugees at the border, or when it comes to animal cruelty, or when it comes to survivors of domestic violence. So we are doing the work. And with your support, since this is how you see the world as well, we can do more work or at a more impactful level. And so for me, there's just all of these basics that you see all of the time. And it's if somebody makes a donation, they're not a donor. There's somebody who has made a donation. When they make a second donation, then they're a donor. And when I talk about donors and donor retention and what can we do to stay in great relationship, perhaps lifelong relationship with the donor, is I'm looking at people who are giving 2 to 3 gifts over 2 years, or maybe even 3 years. But it doesn't necessarily have to be an annual donation, because time flies and people forget, and it has nothing to do with you or the way you're treating the donor or your mission. It just has to do with they have forgotten. Now, there are things that we can do to ensure they don't forget. And that's really just continually being in touch with them. And when I started in the nonprofit fundraising world, people talked about that we don't want to treat donors like an ATM. And I'd like to think even beyond that, like we're all in this together, and our donors have the opportunity to change the world through the work that we're doing. And I see this all of the time through all of my clients. And so when any organization receives a donation, thanking the donor right away is super helpful. One, it lets the donor know that you received the gift. Now, of course, they may have made it through technology and made it online, and that money comes right to you, and they get an automatic thank you, which I never count as a proper thank you. It's just an automatic acknowledgement that we received this. But then what can we do to thank them? And I think a quick phone call or a quick email, a personal email, just one to one, saying that, hey, thanks so much. I saw your donation come in last night. And because of people like you, we can do this. And it can be that simple. It can also be a second paragraph that says, oh, how did you find out about us if it's a new donor? A lot of nonprofits have ways of treating new donors or people who have donated for the first time. And I think that's brilliant. Again, it all just boils down to capacity. What does your organization have? Most of my clients, they have a CEO or executive director that helps with fundraising. They may have a head of development, head of fundraising, and maybe one other person, but certainly not a full team. So the capacity comes into play. Even with the smallest of teams, you can build strong donor relationships. And the importance of that is that when a donor feels in relationship with you, they see them making these donations, they see the work you're doing because of those donations and the impact you have, whether the impact is positive or, wow, we had a really rough experience at the shelter for survivors last night. They want to hear that because they want to be part of the solution of making the world a better place. So thanking them, keeping them complete in line with your impact. And I like to have, if you have the capacity, I like to have a donor in 3 or 4 months after their donation. I like them to know how specifically we spent their donation. That could be a templated email. It could be a quick phone call. I never think it's a bad idea to pick up the phone and call a donor. I know there's a lot of controversy around that. But I've never had a donor answer my call with, don't call me ever again. They may say, I don't have time right now. And then I'll ask if I can send them an email about what I wanted to talk about. But they want to know that their money is doing good. Especially people who give, and I'm not talking about people who are giving major, big, huge gifts. I'm talking about people who work hard like everyone else every day, and they're making a $250 donation, and that is a lot of money to them. That's what I'm talking about, Alex, that they just want to know, yeah, the amount of money that we gave you is a lot to us, and we want to make sure that it's making a difference. So all we have to do is keep them informed.
Let's go back a little bit. You said, and you caught my attention with a one donation from a person, you don't consider them to be a donor. I've never heard that before. What is it about having a second donation that allows you to classify them as a donor? Why is it not the first one, the first donation?
Yeah, so I'll just give you an example that may clear this up. So I'm doing a walk for one of my clients, right? And so I go to my next door neighbor, or my next door neighbor comes to me and says, hey, I'm doing this walk. We have a teenager who lives across the street, and he's involved in all sorts of stuff. So many times he's at the door asking if we'll support whatever cause. So every time he gets like $25, right? So I'll fill out the credit card form or go online, whatever he is working on. Now, am I engaged with that nonprofit? No, heavens no. In most cases, Alex, I don't even really know what the mission is. I trust my neighbor. I know that him and his mom are on the same page with us on how we see the world and our values and ethics. And so I trust that part, but I'm really donating because my teenage neighbor across the street asked me to donate, right? It has nothing to do with the cause. So when I donate and they see my $25 donation pop up, I'm not a donor. I'm the neighbor who gave to this cause for this one-time thing. Now, there's a great chance that I could become a donor, and that's up to the nonprofit. But I don't consider myself at all a donor to the nonprofit by simply making a one-time gift of $25 to support my neighbor.
But you do consider yourself a donor if you gave a second time?
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
And do you think that there is I imagine that's an important distinction between the one and the two. So from the perspective of the nonprofit, like is there I guess one of the goals that you would say is that you want to get to that second donation. You want to actually make them a donor. And don't neglect that one-time donation, let it pass without, like you said, a follow-up email, a thank you, an acknowledgement, an impact assessment of some kind.
Absolutely.
And so those, would you say all of those things that you mentioned, and I'm sure there are many more, that would help getting from that one-time donation to becoming a donor?
Absolutely. And it could even be, they could really personalize it. I mean, and again, this all goes back to capacity, but maybe they know my neighbor across the street, because he is doing this fundraising project for them, or maybe they know about the town where I live, or maybe they want to know why I donated. But to make some type of interaction with me, but to really, I think the key for me as a donor, to other organizations, would be letting me know how they spent the money, because that reminds me that I donated to them. And then it may make me curious on, oh, I love that they spent my money that way. And I wasn't really paying attention when my neighbor asked, but I love this. And then the next time they ask, and they'll ask me personally, then I'm like, yeah, I really loved what they did with that original donation. I'm going to donate again.
Yeah, that makes sense. You also said that it's typical for a donor, especially one or a donation that's made online, to get a automatic acknowledgement. Is there room for personalization in that acknowledgement email, or do you see it as a blank thank you as an acknowledgement, and then a more personalized? You mentioned that either a phone call or an email could happen afterward, but even that second email, even though it's sent from a person, you could incorporate the wording and the tone of that second email in the first acknowledgement email. Like, is there a difference between those two really, or can you achieve the results with just that one acknowledgement email?
I'm 100% with you, Alex. I think you can achieve the results with the first email. I still want a first real connection. So you can absolutely make it super personal. You can do what you need to do to let them know that you've received the donation, but you can make it personal and show kindness and a little blurb about why the donation is important to you. You can do whatever you want, really. I mean, I hesitate to say to add a short little story or something like that, because people aren't really paying attention to this, but you can personalize it to the extent that you have capacity to do that. And I highly recommend that. I still urge you to consider a real touch from somebody in the development team, a board member. I hear all the time that board members want to do something. They want to be helpful. Give them this chance. Send them a weekly list of email addresses to email people who have made a donation that week, or something like that. Get them involved. Get your team involved. If somebody says, "Hey, I really love this, program A," then ask, because you're a development team that's in relationship with the program people, ask one of the program people who's working in that specific program to send the donor an email to say thank you. But definitely make a human contact that isn't just the automatic. Now, some nonprofits, huge nonprofits, don't do this at all. And they're super successful. Their impact on the world is fantastic. But for me, and the way that I fundraise and the way I want to be treated as a donor, and the way I see the relationship between the donor and the team doing the work at the nonprofit, I like that further acknowledgement.
And as you're talking, the personal touch is wonderful. It's also very time consuming. So when you start talking about these kinds of topics, my mind is saying, oh, automation. Like, there are ways that you can keep it personal, especially in the content of the email, but also have some kind of customer journey. If you're using the proper technology, you can have that acknowledgement being sent out, and then depending on whether the email was opened or not, you can have a branch to decide, whether you send this email or that email. And there's a whole journey that you can take that donor along that can feel or should feel very personal, but at the same time, you don't need to have actually somebody manually typing an email from start to finish for every single donor. So did you recommend these kinds of things, or you say, because I'm working mostly with small nonprofits, just go full in manual, at least to start, before you start considering automation?
I would suggest going full in manual and see how that works. And if it doesn't work at all, then definitely see what else is out there. And I realize there is a lot out there, and you could really take your time in finding services that are impeccable to how you want to express yourself to donors. There's still nothing, Alex, at least to me, Alex, that is better than, hey, I'm just having my morning coffee. I saw your donation from last night. I just want to say thank you. Whether that's an email or a phone call, I'd prefer a phone call. What for anyone in the nonprofit world, I just can't see where taking 15 minutes a day just to call people to thank them for a donation interrupts your day. It's just a win-win for everybody.
Obviously, a phone call is much more personal. It takes more time. Do you find that the responses are better, or the responses are better by phone call versus email?
Well, I thought at first, remember, especially if you're calling someone who's made their first donation, they're probably not going to answer your call, unless by chance they answer by mistake, which is always great. That's happened to me. So you're just leaving a voicemail. But yeah, I would say it is impactful when I'm checking my voicemail and I get a quick, super quick to the point message from somebody from a nonprofit that I made a donation to because my neighbor asked me. I do smile, and I'm like, yeah, good on you for doing that.
Yeah, I'm still a bit old school too, in the sense of I prefer sometimes a phone call over a text message because it's more personal. So I can appreciate that. But I'm curious to know about maybe some of the younger donors, who have grown up with text messages, and even though they have a mobile phone, they don't actually use the phone button.
Right. Then there are people that who I know, not who donate to my causes, but who I know who will absolutely say, "Don't call me. If you need me, text me." And I have clients who we have very few phone numbers. It's all email, it's all technology, it's all website, it's all online giving. And so then we revert to email thank yous. If you're a nonprofit, you figure out you absolutely do not have the capacity to do a personal thank you, make that automatic email as personal as possible, and with an invitation to connect.
And to add to your point about the sending an actual email from a person, there's something to be said about, and I've received this before, where I get an email saying, this is an email sent from an actual person. This is not an automated email. And it might sound silly to say it. I'm actually a human sending this, and it's not an automation system sending it or automated system sending it. But there's a genuine aspect to it that I actually will take the time to read that email more. At least I'm more likely to read that email than if it was an automated one. Even though it's, as you said, personal and whatnot, there's something to be said about that little tagline. So maybe that's some food for thought as well.
Well, yeah, and most of us know that if we make a donation online, we're going to get an automatic email, and most of us just delete it.
That's true.
It's just meaningless to us.
Yeah, especially if it's just, because sometimes you can see these emails where it's just, thank you for your donation, and then it has just a section where it says, your name and maybe the donation amount, and it's so obvious that it's not, an actual person that wrote this. Or, they wrote it, but they didn't send it. Like, it's not personal to my particular donation and for this particular moment.
Right. Exactly.
I'm curious, in terms of your services as a consultant and helping these nonprofits, In terms of technology, do you offer any kind of guidance, any recommendations you have, things to avoid, things not to avoid? Obviously, I'm trying to anchor it a little bit to a CRM, but anything else that you normally recommend nonprofits use in terms of technology?
I think CRMs are vital to nonprofits, no matter what the size of the nonprofit. All of my clients have some type of CRM. I have taken one client from Excel spreadsheets to a CRM. And again, when you're looking at a CRM, whether it's one you currently use or if you're looking for a new one, I think capacity and realizing how you work have to be instrumental in the CRM that you're going to choose. Like I don't think that nonprofits spend enough time really looking at CRMs to see that they fit in as many ways as possible. And then just being somebody who does a lot of border work, a lot of domestic violence work, and a lot of human rights work, I would say that most of my clients use, and I believe this is technology, although you could correct me, most of my clients use WhatsApp or Slack to communicate. And I think from a fundraising perspective, this can be super helpful because you can create one place on WhatsApp or Slack where program people can feed you just constant updates on what's happening. And you as somebody doing social media within your development team or meeting with donors or communicating with donors, you can take bits and pieces of those through Slack or WhatsApp or however they're doing the reporting and share them immediately with donors. And I've seen where that can really rocket you to a fourth dimension by being able to share immediate information with donors and your social media followings.
And you would see these. So I would definitely classify these as technology. It is a communication tool, whether it's internal or internal to external. Did you find in these situations that are more internal communications between teams, or is it also between the nonprofits and the donors?
Thank you for clarifying that. It's between teams. So the main thing where it just works so well is that program people, for example, you're working at the border and you're at a specific refugee camp, or you're finishing an asylum case, or you're leaving an ICE hearing, and you just hop into Slack and just put what happened right there. Then whoever's working social media, whoever's about to meet with a donor, they have that information right there. And imagine if you have 20, 30 people doing that, then you have an instant resource of unending information for your donors or for anyone that you're really communicating with.
A communication tool, I think, is vital to a nonprofit. You even mentioned yourself that there's sometimes different teams that are working in silos and they don't know what the other hand is doing. So, creating these kinds of channels or these groups to be able to talk about certain topics and to share information in real time can be a game changer.
Right, exactly. And it is a game changer. I think when I follow some of my clients on Twitter, I can see that this is how they're doing it because I feel like I know way more than I would typically know about what's happening on a day-to-day basis just because this is how they're communicating between programs and development. And this goes back, Alex, to the vital idea that development has to be in relationship with the program folks.
Mm. So my next question is a bit of an open-ended question, and I'll try to keep it narrow. In terms of fundraising principles and building donor relationships, what interesting trends have you noticed in the past couple of years, or at least looking forward, that NPOs should look at in greater detail because they might be beneficial for them to use or look at or spend more time on?
Yeah, I think that for my experience with my clients, we realize that people really care about the mission. And I don't know if that's always been the case where people would make donations and the nonprofit would, send a formal thank you letter, and then maybe an impact report once a year, and then you're on their direct mail list, and God forbid you give them your email address, and then you're getting all these e-appeals, and all of this stuff is happening. But somebody's forgotten that at the end of the day, you as the donor just really care about the work that they're doing for survivors, right? And I think that is definitely getting better, for at least for the organizations that I'm working with and the organizations that my family donates to. And that's a win-win for everybody when that begins to happen. I also think, like, on the hiring end, we're starting to see most organizations, not just in fundraising, but throughout whatever positions they have open. Most or many organizations, I wouldn't say most, but many are starting to share their salary, which is really around equity, right? And is really the right thing to do. That these salaries aren't just hidden, that people and nonprofits are being more transparent. I think that really adds a lot to the nonprofit. I also believe that more and more nonprofits have stopped apologizing for the fact that they pay their staff a decent salary. I'm hoping that is past history. I think more and more nonprofits are looking at donors more as partners and less as saviors, which is, I'm sure there are many who aren't doing any of this right now, Alex, but in my world of human rights, animal rights, border work, immigration, domestic violence, I'm seeing it more and more where nonprofits are reaching out their hand and saying, hey, we really want to serve this many more survivors. We want to represent them more in court, and we can do this with your help. And will you help? I think that's gotten better. And I also believe that there is less in the nonprofit world of this thought that we're working against each other as nonprofits. That even with similar missions, that there's enough out there. There's enough people out there that we don't have to fight each other over a donor.
Yeah, those are great points, and I definitely want to highlight the posting salary ranges. I think is a great trend that I'm happy that more and more, not just nonprofits, but organizations in general are adopting, I should say.
Yeah.
So it's been 3 years. What's in your short-term future? What would you like to see yourself in the next 3 years?
Oh, so my shortest term future is I'm going to go for a run when we're finished. It's a beautiful day here in Southern California. And then I'm just going to keep on keeping on, Alex. Altrui is in a very sweet position right now. I don't want to be a huge consultancy, and I want to keep working with nonprofits that are super close to my heart. And I think what we'll just keep doing is being there and being the best that we can be for nonprofits that we work with, so that they can take their impact in the world to the next level.
Awesome. This has been great. There's a lot more, of course, that people can learn from you. So where can they get in touch with you if they wanted to learn more about you online?
Sure. Our website is altrui.org. That's ALTRUI.org. And my email is dan@altrui.org. And I'm also on LinkedIn and Twitter.
Perfect. Dan, thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope you enjoy your run.
Thank you so much, Alex. Have a great day.
All right, folks, that's it for today. I'm Alexander Lapa, and I hope you join me again next time for Agents of Nonprofit.